Well, I will perhaps just to say a few words. I'll start the clock on myself there. First of all, may I say thank you to the staff because they're doing an incredible amount of work on this. And by staff, I mean our own staff plus the staff of the TTC are involved and Metrolinx. And to me, whereas I heard others expressing concern earlier on about meetings happening in a dark cavern inside a mountain somewhere between the TTC and Metrolinx, I think that consistent with some of the comments made around here by members of the committee, that's exactly what we should have going on, which is as many of those kinds of meetings as possible in order to ensure at the end of the day, and Councillor Perks is right about this, I'll come back to him in a minute, that we're serving the needs of our people. But I think Councillor Thompson, and I want to particularly associate myself with the remarks of Councillors Thompson and Bailão, in Councillor Thompson acknowledging the reality of how our economy works, and if you're going to connect people to opportunity, you can't just look at it solely from the standpoint of exactly what's going to go on within the boundaries of 416. You have to look at it in a broader context, recognizing that he's right, that we shouldn't be paying exclusively for transit that has nothing to do with 416 residents, but no one's suggesting that. And in associating myself with the remarks of Councillor Bailão, I want to say that I think she spoke about the need for us to start finding ways to get to yes on things instead of finding ways to get to no. And I think that this is a project where that's exactly what we're doing. Let's go back and look at what these studies were commissioned to do. They were commissioned to objectively and expertly assess and advise on a number of issues which have been in need of precisely this kind of objective examination since this concept first surfaced, admittedly, in an election campaign where I didn't have access to squads of engineers and ridership experts and various other people. I had what I had. And so we're now doing the work that needs to be done, and I'm delighted at that. And I think a number of the questions raised by members of council today are perfectly legitimate questions which I'm sure our staff have taken note of. And if they weren't already being asked and answered those questions, they will now be. But I wanted to just review what's happened in the last 11 months, because that's the period of time since this issue surfaced as a real item to be grappled with here at City Hall. First of all, we've commissioned these studies. And as Councillor Thompson pointed out a moment ago, this is as much an interim report as it is anything else. It's not meant to be and is not represented as a final report. Secondly, we have worked continuously and extensively with Metrolinx in order to ensure the orderly development of SmartTrack within the context of RER. There is no question the two are related. Anybody who's suggesting that's some sort of a revelation, SmartTrack was built on the concept of using GO train tracks, and that came to be known as Regional Express Rail and has now been funded as such by the province. And so we're working continuously and extensively with them to make sure both concepts, and Councillor Mihevc was right in what he was talking about, which is that SmartTrack was meant to be, I think to use the expression of Mr. Livy, a more urban, I think he called it, a kind of service built on the Regional Express Rail platform. The third thing, and I think we overlook this, and we even overlook the news that could have been bad news last night, but is good news. We have secured the funded commitment to electrify the Stouffville and Kitchener lines. And one of the questions I was asked most frequently during the election, what if, when the province decides which lines they're going to electrify, they don't electrify the lines that represent SmartTrack? And the fact of the matter is, they have now indicated which lines they're going to electrify, and the two lines, Stouffville and Kitchener, are expressly and specifically included on that list that will be funded in the early stages. And secondly, in that 11-month period, we have secured a federal participation to the extent of billions of dollars that are going to participate in this. And when I said last night could have been bad news, we had the express commitment of the current Prime Minister of Canada to the project. He was the first. But the good news is that the incoming Prime Minister of Canada has also specifically committed himself to funding SmartTrack in addition to other transit initiatives. So that's what's been done in 11 months. And the reason this thing sits here today and continues to be studied is not because I campaigned, though I did, and received a mandate to proceed with this from the people of Toronto across the city. But I think aside from that part, it remains what it's always been, which is the public transportation option, which potentially provides the most relief from congestion in traffic, getting cars off the roads, and congestion on the existing transit lines, as evidenced by the two examples that I asked Mr. Upfold about this morning, in the shortest period of time. To get it done, and connecting people to jobs, which I think is vitally important. And I just hope and I sense a generally positive sort of sense around here, but I hope that we don't get into being either sort of Douglas or Debbie Downer about these things. It's fine to ask questions, but we had some things being put to us this morning saying, well, potentially, you know, this could happen, or potentially that's happening. Well, potentially the sun may not come up tomorrow morning. I mean, but hopefully that won't be the case. But the bottom line is we're proceeding ahead in a responsible fashion to do the studies on this and to make sure that we end up in a position where we know exactly what is going to be viable and responsible and proper. And I think that that is why I support the recommendations today, including the two motions that have been put forward by members of the committee. And I think unless there are others who want to be heard, we'll proceed to deal with those motions, the amendments, and the main recommendations.